And I was shocked of how open these debates were. A very emotional kind of reaction that I have only experienced in Europe. And I assumed it was because it was the European openness that created it. And then I saw it happening in China. So if you have people that make their own decision whether they're going to drink the water or not, then you must have also debate about chlorinated water. Because if they make the wrong decision, people will simply not drink it. And that would be a problem. That would be an economic problem, let's say. That could be a social problem for the politician to resolve.
I would like to ask you about China, because you did say that you spent quite a lot of time in China. Have you found anything that really surprised you and perhaps would also surprise other listeners?
Yes, I could say a lot of things about China, and I can almost only say positive things, to be honest. That is my personal experience in China. So, for example, one surprising thing that I found, and I still have a hard time to persuade my colleagues who have not worked in China about, is the openness that I found. Because we all have this idea that China is a very closed place. And of course, it's true that it's much closed the decision-making procedure, as I said before, than what we're used to in the West. That goes without saying. But the fact that the decision-making procedure is closed doesn't make the society closed, doesn't make the process of debate closed, doesn't make our collaborations, for example, closed, if you like. And I would say no, actually. My experience of China has been a quite open debate. I have seen quite open collaborations who have collaborated in almost everything that there is to collaborate in our area, at least. I still repeat, if you want to work in I don't know what, I don't know, security systems or whatever, yeah, you don't try. If you want to collaborate with China security systems, then yeah, you will not be able to do that. But then it's the same in many countries, including the US, by the way. So I don't consider that as a bad thing personally. So my personal experience collaborating with China is open, basically collaboration, and it's I won't say without challenges. There are challenges. There are even cultural challenges that one is faced with. For instance, the way that the debates are taking place. We are used to hear that there are, I don't know, there is a big group of people, and they are not only open but very blatant somehow to the way that they approach the debates. They can be very accusatory. They can be offending even. And usually does not, but not always, but it even is non-hierarchical as well. So you can have a young person coming up and say that I completely disagree with this thing, and this is, it's crap, it's but whatever. They can be quite strong and offensive in that thing. This you don't see in China. It's a much more polite way of addressing the debate. It's hierarchical. A junior person will never overtake the senior person in the debate. They will always have the lower level of interaction that the senior person will always give. So I consider that not the closed political system. I consider it as a kind of a cultural difference there. So in that sense, it can be kind of challenging, actually, to have a common debate.
So then would the, say, junior person still voice their opinions in that kind of situation, or
I think they will always respect the senior person, and they will not create a conflict with a senior person. Definitely not an open conflict. Here you can see this can happen. Actually, you can say I disagree with you, especially with our Nordic friends. Sometimes we're even shocked about how disagreements, some of themselves are so blatant, for instance, but they're used to it, The Dutch people are used to having it doesn't mean a lot, they can shout at each other and they can still reach a common decision. So even we as Germans, let's say, are shocked sometimes with how blatant and open they can be, because here we also have our kind of implicit hierarchies. But in China, for instance, they're quite strong, these hierarchies. And I dare say, like, let's say in Russia is also like that. Less so than in China, but more. And also the use of the words, there could be much more. Okay, that could be also a kind of translation issue there, but not as a direct. It can be. Going around basically the subject a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
So you need to pick actually the main points sometimes. While here we're used to sometimes be, well, here, when I say here, I mean maybe Germany. Sometimes we complained about our UK colleagues that they are kind of talking a lot around it, but they don't give us really a kind of straightforward answer.
Would you mind giving us an example of a project you've worked on with China, just to demonstrate, so we help you to visualize what you mean by being open? So you spoke about open dialogue. Were there other aspects that you thought, oh, wow, this is actually a bit different to what I thought this experience would be like?
One of my first experiences, and one of the most positive experiences, the one that was almost shockingly positive for me, was the GM food debate. Actually, that's also my background. I took part in that debate, actually analyzed for my PhD in the 90s already. So when we first had the first GM foods arriving in Europe, and there was all this huge, the conflicts arising out of that. That's ended up in basically the banning of GM foods and even the technology, more or less, in Europe. So that at the time was really one of the strongest and most conflictuous debates we had with the United States, for instance, with our colleagues there, because they're all like completely positive. They couldn't understand what on earth is wrong with the Europeans. They do not accept GM food. What's wrong with GM foods? And the Europeans were completely like, this is the hell on earth, basically. The GM food is going to destroy everything that's we live for and what we believe in, and so on and so forth. So there was very strong debate. So later on, these debates started in China, and I was shocked of how open these debates were. You would also have people like prominent people coming up in the debates, and they say, what is, this kind of GM foods, they want to destroy us, they will, kill us, they will make this kind of thing, and what is the government thinking about that? So they should stop it immediately, and there's no way we can accept it. So you saw this kind of very similar approach to, I don't know what, everyone says the government, but this thing, there is no way I can accept this thing. A very emotional kind of reaction that I have only experienced in Europe, and I assumed it was because it was the European openness that created it. And then I saw it happening in China, and in China actually had more or less the similar approach. In the beginning, there was a kind of uncertainty about that, but there was a kind of positive, from the technocratic point of view, a kind of positive approach to the GM, let's say, food. And then there were public reactions that became very obvious, actually, reactions. They reached the media quite fast. There were people complaining everywhere. And if you like, they almost pressurized and the government into reconsidering, actually, their technocratic approach. And the result was more or less the same like in Europe. So you have a much more careful, actually, approach to the GM food and GM in agriculture in general. So I found that quite positive, and I think also from my Chinese colleagues, it was one of the things that created this kind of the new China, the new openness within the Chinese society, that came along with the openness in trade, for instance, in the individual, let's say, individual movements, individual developments within that trade, and how people were free to start their businesses and to do things that they wanted to do. So it was part of the whole kind of process.
Do you see that happening? So that was in the 90s something. Do you see that similarity with other projects over time?
Yes and no. I would say that as far as I'm concerned, we have reached the point when in China there are public debates for every scientific and technological development of a certain, let's say, sensitivity. So we had similar debates in China in the nanotechnologies, for instance, which was an interesting debate because again, nanotechnology, of course, it's like AI. It's a very general umbrella. So in Europe, we started early this nanotech debates because of the problems that we had with the biotech debates in the past. So governments were kind of quite willing to open up a debate about nanotechnology applications quite early to avoid this kind of conflicts, which are very costly, by the way, economically costly, this kind of debates. If you develop products that they cost the billions and then the market doesn't take it, basically, and then you have to even to ban them, that can be really costly. So with the nanotech debate, we started it early as well. And kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't call I wouldn't say the word imported, but it was the kind of also taken up in China. So in China, we had an interesting situation whereby in the beginning, before there was a public debate about nanotechnologies, there were commercial products that they were advertised as having a nanotechnology or nanoparticles, like, I don't know, these creams, like face creams or this kind, it was a nanotechnology made type of thing. And then the debate started. And because you had also, the already some ready-made arguments that you could take from Europe about the positive and negative aspects, they were all taken up similarly in China. And then the perception, people's perception of nanotechnology started changing from a positive by default because it sounded good to a debate about the pros and cons, and then started becoming more negative. And actually, from what they told me, they stopped advertising. It's actually nowadays is considered negative to advertise a product that contains nanotech material, let's say. So it was an interesting development there, and that was also the result of a public debate. So policy had nothing to do with that. The risk assessment, the official risk assessment and the procedures that create the science and technology policy decision making was completely different than the public debate. But the results was as we see it. So now nanotech is also slowly, like in Europe, slowly and very carefully taken up. It's not yes, great nanotech, and let's say let's put it everywhere we can type of thing.
Are the debates held by the support of the government, or do they run separately?
Both, I would say. One thing is that the government itself has incorporated actually official in the official. I have to remember now which number of the 5-year plan since 2014, let's say about, yeah. So 2014, 15, the RRI, the Responsible Research and Innovation, and the public participation, let's say in decision making and science and technology policy issues, is being written as a kind of aim within the 5-year plan for science and technology. So it shows definitely a will, at least in writing. Let's put it like that. So in writing, there is a will to have a political a policy, let's call it like that, a policy initiated debates, open debates about science. So that's one thing. The other thing is the media debates that happen. And the media debates in China, they happen everywhere, from the local social media to the official media. And science and technology is an issue that's it's almost impossible not to create a public debate, because nowadays it has a direct effect, so it's like whatever people say, whether it's good or bad, I still have to decide whether I will drink this water, which is, I don't know, it has, it's chlorinated or whatever, you know. So I have to decide whether I will drink chlorinated water or not. So there must be an S&T debate about the pros and cons of chlorinated water, so I can make my decision. And this can only be in the public by the use of media, let's say. So you cannot avoid that nowadays. So if you have people that make their own decision whether they're going to drink the water or not, then you must have also debate about chlorinated water, as simple as that. And in that sense, it's a good thing for the policy. So the politicians would like to create that debate, because it's also good for them, if you know what I mean. They need to make a decision about whether to chlorinate or not to chlorinate. Because if they make the wrong decision, people will simply not drink it. You cannot make people drink something they don't want to drink anymore. And that would be a problem. That would be an economic problem, let's say. That could be a social problem for the politician to resolve. So I think there is a will. How far it goes, I don't know. It's in the eyes of the beholder, you know, how far this thing goes. Many people outside of China will tell you it doesn't go far enough. But then their standards are like the Dutch standards. And I don't think we should judge China with the Dutch standards, if you know what I mean.